This story is titled, My Mom Went on a Vacation with Her New Family on My Birthday, Leaving Me Home Alone. So I kicked them out of the house because it is legally mine. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. What's up, Reddit? I've been debating whether to post this, so go easy on me. I'm an 18-year-old guy, and to be honest, my life has been chaotic for as long as I can remember. This isn't a cry for help. It's about what happened when I finally decided to take control of my life and the house I grew up in. Let's just say things got messy, and not in a fun way. Here's some background. My dad passed away when I was 10. Sucked, obviously. He wasn't just a great dad, but also my best friend. After he died, he left the house we lived in to me and some savings in a trust fund. My grandparents were in charge of the whole deal since I was a kid at the time. The house was meant to be mine legally when I turned 18, but until then, my mom had full access to it because, she was supposed to take care of me. Except, that didn't exactly go as planned. My mom remarried when I was 12, and things shifted big time. Her new husband, let's call him Steve, not his real name, came with 2 kids of his own. Suddenly, it felt like my mom had started her second life with this new family, and I was just kind of there, like an old piece of furniture they hadn't gotten around to throwing out yet. At first, I tried to make it work. I was 12. What else was I supposed to do? Steve wasn't awful to me or anything, but he wasn't great either. He treated me like a guest in my own house. And his kids? Don't even get me started. They weren't horrible, but they were loud, messy, and entitled. They'd take over the living room, leave their stuff everywhere, and straight up ignored me most of the time. By the time I hit high school, I'd figured out how things worked. If I wanted anything done for me, I had to do it myself. My mom was too busy playing supermom to Steve's kids. My room was the only place I felt like I had any control, and even that started to change. Slowly but surely, Steve's kids' stuff started creeping in. Old toys, random junk, even boxes of clothes. One time, I came home and found a broken scooter in the corner of my room. When I asked my mom about it, she just shrugged and said, "There's no space in the garage." At this point, I was spending more time with my grandparents than at home. They were the ones who actually cared. They'd make sure I had what I needed, help me with school stuff, and just listened, My grandpa especially always had my back. He's the kind of guy who doesn't say much but always knows what to do. Anyway, fast forward to a few weeks before my 18th birthday. My grandparents sat me down to talk about the house. My grandpa was super chill about it, like he always is. He said, "The house is going to be yours soon. Legally, you'll have full control over it, and it's up to you what you want to do with it." I nodded along, but in my head I was like, cool, but nothing's really going to change, right? Man, I had no idea how wrong I was. So, it's the night before my birthday, and I was actually kind of excited. Turning 18 is a shifting stage of life. You can vote, you're technically an adult, and in my case, I'd finally own the house. It felt like the start of something new. I'd been imagining a decent birthday. Nothing fancy, maybe a family dinner, maybe a cake, maybe some small gifts, just something to mark the day. But no, of course not. I'm sitting on the couch, scrolling on my phone, when my mom strolls in. She's holding a travel bag, and has that casual, distracted look she always gets when she's not paying attention to. "Oh, by the way," she says, as if she's reminding me to take out the trash. "We're leaving tomorrow for a vacation. Just me, Steve, and the kids. You don't mind staying here alone, right?" I blinked at her. I honestly thought I misheard her at first. "Wait, you're leaving? Tomorrow? That's my birthday." She barely looked up. "Yeah, I know, but we've had this trip planned for months. You'll be fine. You're old enough to handle yourself. Order some pizza or something." Order some pizza or something? That was her big plan for my 18th birthday? No party, no dinner, no acknowledgement that the day even mattered? I felt this heat rise in my chest. Like, I wanted to yell, "Are you serious right now?" But I didn't. What would have been the point? So I just sat there, staring at her while she walked away, completely unfazed. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of suitcases being rolled across the hallway. I got up, still half asleep, and walked into the kitchen. There they were, my mom, Steve, and the kids, all dressed up in their vacation clothes, looking like the picture-perfect family. My mom glanced at me as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "Oh, good, you're up. Don't forget to lock the door when we leave." I leaned against the counter, watching as they laughed and joked, completely ignoring me. "So, you're really just leaving?" I asked. I felt like I was holding back a tidal wave. Steve looked up from his phone and said, Come on, man. You're 18. You don't need a babysitter. Besides, this trip's been on the calendar for weeks. I just stood there, gripping the counter so hard. My mom didn't even look at me when she said, "We'll be back in a week. There's food in the fridge." And then they simply left. I stood in the doorway and watched as they piled into the car, laughing and talking like they were headed to Disneyland or something. Nobody looked back. They just drove off, leaving me standing there in my pajamas, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I closed the door and locked it, like she told me to, and for a moment, I just stood there in the empty house. The silence was deafening. I spent the morning in a weird haze. I didn't know whether to be angry or sad or just numb. I opened the fridge to see what food my mom had left for me, and it was pathetic. Half a carton of milk, some old takeout, and a box of frozen chicken nuggets. Cool, I thought. Happy freaking birthday to me. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my grandma. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We'll be over soon. Love you." That text hit me like a lifeline. I don't know what I would have done without my grandparents. They showed up about an hour later with a cake, a bunch of balloons, and a gift bag. The second I opened the door, my grandma pulled me into a hug and said, "Happy birthday, my boy." My grandpa followed behind her with a proud smile and a wrapped gift under his arm. They didn't just save my birthday, they saved me. We spent the afternoon in the living room, eating cake and talking. They told me stories about my dad, how proud he'd be of me, and how much he loved me. It was the first time in forever that I felt like I actually mattered to someone. After we'd had cake, my grandpa handed me an envelope. "This is from the lawyer," he said. "It's official now. The house is yours." I opened it, and there it was, the paperwork that made me the legal owner of the house. My grandpa smiled and said, "This is your home now. You're in charge." For a second, I didn't know how to feel. On one hand, it felt good, like really good, to finally have something that was mine. On the other hand, it made me realize just how messed up things had gotten. This house had been my dad's gift to me, a place where I was supposed to feel safe and loved. Instead, it had turned into Steve's playground, where I was treated like an unwanted guest. My grandma must have noticed the look on my face, because she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You deserve to be happy here. If anyone makes you feel otherwise, remember, you have the power to change that." Her words stuck with me, but I didn't know what to do with them just yet. That night, after my grandparents left, I was lying in bed, scrolling through Instagram, when I saw my mom's post. It was a picture of her, Steve, and the kids, all grinning in matching outfits at some fancy resort. I don't know why I clicked on the comments, but I did. It was full of stuff like, "What a beautiful family," and "You're such an amazing mom," and not a single mention of me. They didn't see me as part of their family. I wasn't their son or their brother. I was just the guy who happened to live in their house. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to keep living like this. This house was mine, and it was time I started acting like it. The day after my birthday, I woke up with this weird mix of determination and dread. Like part of me was ready to take back control of my life and this house, but the other part of me was scared of what that would actually mean. It's not like I'd ever stood up to my mom before. Not really. Most of the time, I just kept my mouth shut because it was easier than dealing with the fallout. But after what happened on my birthday, I couldn't keep doing that. I wasn't just some kid who had to put up with their crap anymore. So I decided to take a hard look at the state of things. Let me tell you, this house was a disaster. The living room, covered in their stuff. Steve's tools, the kids' toys, random junk they hadn't bothered to put away. The kitchen? Gross. But the worst part? My room. I opened the door and it was like stepping into a storage unit. Boxes everywhere. My desk, the one place I used to sit and do my homework, or just chill, was buried under stacks of papers and old magazines, and my bed was pushed to the corner, almost like an afterthought, while the rest of the space was taken over by their junk. I stood there for a minute, just staring at the mess, and I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a dumping ground, and I was done letting them treat it like one. I called my grandparents that afternoon to tell them what was going on. "You've been patient long enough," my grandpa said. "If you want them out, you have every legal right. We'll back you up." Hearing him say that gave me a boost of confidence. I mean, I'd always known the house was legally mine, but having my grandpa, the guy who's always been the backbone of our family, say it out loud made it feel real. Still, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. My mom wasn't just going to pack up and leave because I asked nicely. I needed a plan. My grandparents helped me go through all the paperwork from my dad's estate, just to make sure there wouldn't be any legal surprises. The lawyer confirmed what we already knew. The house was mine, and my mom had no claim to it. If I wanted to, I could issue a formal eviction notice and make them leave. But even with all that on my side, the thought of confronting her made me anxious. "You're doing the right thing," my grandma said. You deserve to live in a place where you feel respected and cared for. Don't let anyone take that away from you, not even your mother. Over the next few days, I started preparing for what I knew was going to be a battle. I cleaned up as much of the house as I could, partly because I needed something to focus on, and partly because I wanted to remind myself that this was my space. I packed up all the junk they'd left in my room and stacked it in the hallway. I cleared off my desk, rearranged my bed, and put up a couple of photos of my dad that I'd found in an old box. It felt good, like I was reclaiming a little piece of what had been taken from me. But as much as I tried to focus on the positives, I couldn't shake the anxiety. What if my mom refused to leave? What if Steve got involved and made things even worse? I'd seen how they ganged up on me before, turning every argument into some twisted blame game where I was always the bad guy. Still, I knew I couldn't back down. The breaking point came a week later, when they got back from their vacation. I was in the living room when the front door opened, and they all walked in, dragging their suitcases behind them. My mom glanced at me and said, "Hey," like she hadn't just abandoned me on my birthday. Steve was cracking some joke about how expensive the trip had been, and the kids were already arguing over who got to play on the TV first. I just sat there, watching them act like nothing had happened. They just didn't care. Not about me, not about the house, not about anything except themselves. That night, I finally decided I couldn't wait any longer. I walked into the kitchen, where my mom was scrolling on her phone. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up, barely interested. "What's up?" I tried to sound serious. "I want you and your family to move out." Her head snapped up, and for a second, she just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What are you talking about?" "This is my house now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Legally, it belongs to me. And I'm done being treated like a guest in my own home. I want you to leave." She laughed, like I'd just told her the dumbest joke she'd ever heard. "You can't do anything. You're just a kid. You can't kick us out. This is our home." "No," I said, my voice sharper now. "It's not. It's mine. Dad left it to me, and I have the paperwork to prove it." That's when Steve walked in. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between me and my mom. "He's trying to kick us out," she said. Steve crossed his arms and smirked. "Good luck with that, buddy. You're not going to make it on your own anyway." He pissed me off, but I tried to keep my cool. "This isn't about you," I said. "It's about me finally taking back what's mine. You have 30 days to pack up and leave. After that, I'll have no problem getting the lawyer involved." My mom stood up, her face red with anger. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "We've lived here for years. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said, my voice cold now. "You've had years to figure it out. Instead, you treated me like I didn't exist. Now I'm done." What followed was a shouting match I'll never forget. My mom called me ungrateful, selfish, every name in the book. Steve jumped in too, accusing me of being a spoiled brat who didn't appreciate everything they'd done for me. Then she stormed upstairs, slamming doors and yelling loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Steve hung around, pacing the living room like he was trying to intimidate me, muttering things like, "This kid has no idea what he's doing." But I didn't back down. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on my bed, shaking from all the adrenaline. I kept telling myself I did the right thing, but it was hard not to feel overwhelmed. This wasn't some minor argument. I just stood up to my own mom and told her to pack up and leave. The next morning, the tension was thick. My mom wouldn't even look at me. Steve kept shooting me these smug little looks, like he thought I'd cave any second. The kids, who probably didn't understand what was going on, just ran around the house like usual, leaving their toys and snacks everywhere. By the time my grandparents showed up, I was about ready to lose it. My grandpa came in first, his face calm but serious, followed by my grandma, who looked like she was ready to fight someone. My mom was in the kitchen, pretending to ignore them, but I saw her glance up when my grandpa walked in. "We're here to make sure this goes smoothly," my grandpa said, setting his briefcase on the counter. "Where's Steve?" Steve came in from the living room, his usual cocky grin plastered on his face. "Ah, so the cavalry's here. What's this about?" "This is about the eviction notice," my grandpa said, pulling out a stack of papers. "Legally, this house belongs to my grandson, and you and your family have 30 days to leave. This document makes it official." Steve's grin disappeared real quick. He grabbed the paper and skimmed it, his face turning redder with every word. "You can't be serious," he said, throwing the paper back on the counter. "This is ridiculous." "It's the law," my grandpa said firmly. That's when my mom finally spoke up. "You really want to do this?" she said, glaring at me. "You're going to throw your own mother out of her home? What kind of son are you?" The guilt hit me hard, but I refused to let it show. "It's not your home," I said quietly. "It never was. It was Dad's, and now it's mine. You've treated me like a guest here for years, and I'm done. I deserve better. Her face twisted, like she couldn't decide whether to cry or yell. She went with yelling. "You're piece of shot," she said. "Everything I've done for you? And this is how you repay me? After all the sacrifices I've made?" "Sacrifices?" I shot back, losing my temper. "You mean like abandoning me on my birthday so you could play Happy Family with Steve? Or turning my room into a storage unit? Or acting like I don't even exist half the time?" "Yeah, thanks for all the sacrifices, Mom." The argument went on for what felt like forever. My mom tried every trick in the book, crying, yelling, cursing. Steve jumped in too, calling me ungrateful and saying I'd regret this decision when I realized I couldn't handle living on my own. Even the kids got involved at one point, whining about how mean I was being and how they didn't want to leave. But I held my ground. "You have 30 days, I said, cutting them off. "After that, if you're not out, I'll have no choice but to get the authorities involved. I don't want it to come to that, but I will if I have to." My grandparents backed me up every step of the way. My grandma, who's usually the sweet and quiet type, even stepped in when my mom tried to use my dad against me. "Your father would be so disappointed in you," my mom said, tears streaming down her face. "This is not what he would have wanted." "Don't you dare!" My grandma got sharp. "Don't you dare use his memory to manipulate him. You've taken advantage of that boy and this house for long enough. It's time for you to move on." The rest of the day was a blur. My mom disappeared into her room, slamming the door behind her, while Steve muttered curses under his breath and stomped around the house like a toddler throwing a tantrum. I spent most of the afternoon with my grandparents, going over the legal process and making sure everything was airtight. That night, my uncle came over with a locksmith to change the locks on the doors. My mom didn't even come out of her room to stop him, but Steve stood in the doorway, watching like he wanted to pick a fight. "You really think this is going to work?" he said, crossing his arms. "You're just a kid. You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not," I said, meeting his glare. "But I know one thing. I'm not going to let you treat me like crap in my own house anymore." Over the next few weeks, things got even uglier. My mom and Steve refused to pack up their stuff, clearly hoping I'd back down. Instead, they started making life as miserable as possible. The kids left their toys everywhere, blasting the TV at full volume every chance they got. Steve kept accidentally eating the food I bought for myself, and my mom started leaving passive-aggressive notes around the house. "You'll regret this," one of them said. "Family is all you've got." I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch a wall. But instead, I called my grandparents and told them what was happening. "You're doing everything by the book," my grandpa reassured me. "They're just trying to wear you down. Don't let them." By the time the 30-day deadline rolled around, my mom and her family had finally started packing, but it was clear they weren't going quietly. On the last day, my mom gave one final try. "I hope you're happy," she said, as she loaded the last box into their car. "You've torn this family apart." I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching as they drove away, leaving the house and me behind. When the door finally shut, I felt a wave of relief like I'd never felt before. It didn't feel real at first. The house, for once, was completely silent. I just stood there for a few minutes, letting it sink in. For the first time in years, the house was mine. My grandparents came over not long after they left. My grandma pulled me into a hug the second she walked in. "You did it," she said, her voice full of pride. My grandpa nodded behind her. "We're proud of you, kid," he said. "Standing up for yourself isn't easy, but you did the right thing." We spent the rest of the day cleaning the house from top to bottom, until we got everything back to its place. The first week after they left was peaceful, but it didn't last long. My mom wasn't the kind of person to let things go quietly. She started calling and texting me constantly, alternating between curses and outright threats. Something like, "Don't think I won't take you to court over this." At first, I ignored her, but the texts kept coming, and the things she said started to get under my skin. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I knew that. The house was legally mine, and I had every right to reclaim it. But still, the way she talked made me second-guess myself. I called my grandparents to tell them what was going on, and they immediately stepped in to help. My grandpa got in touch with the lawyer who handled my dad's estate, and we went over everything again to make sure we were on solid ground. "You're doing everything by the book," the lawyer reassured me. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on." That gave me some peace of mind, but the stress was still there. My mom wasn't just trying to get to me, she was also dragging the rest of the family into it. She started spreading rumors among my extended relatives, painting me as some heartless, ungrateful son who had thrown his own mother out onto the street. At first, I didn't even know it was happening. I started getting random texts and calls from aunts and cousins I hadn't talked to in years, all of them asking me what was going on. So I sat down with my grandparents and some of my closer relatives to explain everything. I told them about the neglect, the clutter, the way she abandoned me on my birthday. I even showed them the legal paperwork proving the house was mine. My uncle, who's always been blunt, didn't hold back. She's been using you in this house for years, he said. It's about time someone stood up to her. Word started spreading, and eventually the tide turned. Some relatives still believed my mom's version of events, but the ones who mattered most had my back. My uncle even confronted her at a family gathering, calling her out for the way she'd treated me. You abandoned him on his birthday, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And now you're playing the victim? Give me a break. Not long after that, my mom showed up at the house unannounced. She banged on the door like she was trying to break it down. When I opened it, she launched into a full-blown rant. Let me in, she yelled. This is my home too. Where are we supposed to go? I stood there, trying to stay calm. It's not your home, I said firmly. It's mine. Legally. You've had years to figure out your situation, but instead, you treated this place like a free ride. Now it's time for you to move on. She tried to push past me, but my grandpa, who happened to be visiting that day, stepped in. Her tone shifted from anger to full-on rage, her face contorting like she was about to explode. Are you freaking serious right now? She screamed, jabbing her finger toward my grandpa. This is your fault. You've always hated me, haven't you? You've been waiting for this moment to turn my own son against me, you old bastard. My grandpa, as calm as ever, didn't flinch. This isn't about me, he said evenly. This is about you, and the choices you've made. You've taken advantage of him in this house for long enough. It's time to move on. But she wasn't done. Move on? Move on to what, huh? A cardboard box? You think you're so high and mighty with your little speeches, but you're nothing but a bitter old man sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. My grandpa raised an eyebrow but didn't engage. You've made your bed, he said. Now you have to lie in it. That only made her more furious. She turned to me next. You're just like him, she spat, her eyes wild. A selfish, ungrateful little brat. I hope this all blows up in your face, and when it does, don't come crying to me, or to your precious grandpa. She stormed down the driveway, shouting over her shoulder. And you, she yelled at my grandpa, pointing at him. You're a miserable old fool who ruined everything. I hope you're happy, you piece of crap. I stood there, my chest tight, watching her leave. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, hearing those words thrown at the one person who had always had my back. But as my grandpa put a reassuring hand on my shoulder, I reminded myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. In the weeks that followed, things finally started to settle down. My grandparents and I spent more time together, cleaning, redecorating, and turning the house into a place I could truly call home. My uncles and aunts pitched in too, helping with repairs and offering advice on how to manage everything on my own. The house wasn't just a house anymore. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could build my future and honor my dad's memory. Every time I walked through the door, I felt this deep sense of pride and gratitude. Honestly, I feel like I got some scars from all this, and not the kind you can see. I always thought turning 18 meant freedom and starting fresh, but no one ever tells you how complicated and messy it can be. I didn't expect the adult world to suck this much, and I definitely didn't expect to face all this drama just to feel like I had a place to call home. It wasn't easy. Like, not even close. There were so many moments where I wanted to throw in the towel and let them win, just because it would have been less exhausting. But now that I've come out the other side, I can say reclaiming my home and my life was the best decision I've ever made. It feels different now when I walk through the front door. This place doesn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It feels like mine. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what comes next. For one, I've been working on turning the house into a place I can actually enjoy. And honestly, I think I deserve to celebrate. After everything that happened, I want to mark this as the start of something better. I was thinking about throwing a proper birthday party, like the one I should have had in the first place. Nothing too wild, but something fun. Maybe invite some friends, cook a nice meal, and finally have a night that's all about good vibes and no drama. What do you guys think? Should I go for it? Thanks for reading, by the way. This whole experience has been a lot, but getting it all out here has been weirdly therapeutic. If you've got any thoughts or advice, drop them below. I'd love to hear what you think. And seriously, thank you for sticking with me through this. It means a lot.